Welcome to the 210 Nerds. As always, my name is Max James, and I'm here to present you the first ever episode of Space March Madness 2014, in which I'll be watching a 24-hour straight block of movies that take place in space. And for this first outing, I'm going for the obvious. But which one? In one hand, I have Star Wars. In the other, I have Star Trek. But which one? Both franchises have tons of material to cover the 24-hour criteria that I have set for myself. But a decision had to be made, and I chose Star Trek. The total runtime runs around 19 hours for the 10 films, even though the whole 24 hours could have been met if I added the 2009 Star Trek and as well as the sequel Star Trek in the Darkness. I have excluded these two films for canon reasons. And with this choice, it leaves me with roughly 5 hours of time and space to be filled. So, I'll be watching episodes from the original series and Next Gen that tie into the movies that I'll be watching. Example, I'll be watching Space Seed that ties in with Wrath of Khan, and Best of Both Worlds that tie into First Contact. And as well as I'll be throwing in a few of my personal favorites as well. Since my real intention of this video is not to review, but to experience these films as a collective story, I will just be sharing my thoughts. And to keep this video from dragging on what will seem like light years, I will be bunching up a few of the movies, say Motion Picture, Wrath of Khan, and Search for Spock, all as one movie, and I'll kind of review them all three at one time. But here and there, I will also be watching a few of the movies by themselves. I also will be periodically showing you what time it is, and as well as updating my progress on Twitter at one and only MSJ. So, with all that out of the way, it's time to sit in the captain's chair of the USS Enterprise and hope to God you're not wearing a red shirt. It's time to start Space March Madness 2014. It is currently 10:39 in the morning on Tuesday, which I will end this on Wednesday at 10:39. So my 24 hours has officially started, and I will be doing 3 movies at a time: Motion Picture, Wrath of Khan, and as well as Search for Spock. And that's equals about that's a 2-hour movie, 6 hours. So, I'll be back in 6 hours to kind of do my little thoughts on the first 3 movies of Star Trek. The time is 3:28 p.m. I've just finished the first 2 movies, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and as well as Star Trek the Wrath of Khan. I was originally going to be putting Star Trek Search for Spock in there, but I changed my mind because when I kind of sat down and started watching the motion picture for the first time in a very, very long time, I started to realize how different this one is, because I've seen Wrath of Khan plenty of times to know how that movie turns out and how it feels and what it looks like in the sequences and stuff like that. But when I watched motion picture, it was just like, oh, it's not when you think of Star Trek, you think of kind of like upbeat, and even with me, when I kind of know how it's filmed and how it will look, man, Star Trek the motion picture, it looks completely different from all the other films, and I like it for that. And this, I know there's a big debate, I think, between Star Trek 1 and Star Trek 5. I do believe those are the two ones that are hated, but I'll get into more in Star Trek 5 later on. But for right now, Star Trek 1 is just, I loved it. I think Star Trek 1 is a pretty decent movie, especially a few of the sequences which were very out of place for a Star Trek movie. There's a sequence where they're finally made it into the this machine kind of thing that's going on its way to to kill Earth or blow up Earth or whatever you want to call it, and to find the creator. And they're in there, and the intruder kind of comes on board, and it's just in the form of this giant lightning bolt type of thing, and it's just kind of sweeping around the bridge, and it's shocking people. But the way it's kind of filmed and the way the technology of their special effects for back then, it kind of makes it very gritty and awesome, and I really liked how it was filmed, and it just seemed really cool to me. And then then there's another sequence in there, kind of reminiscent of that scene where Spock kind of takes upon himself to kind of go out to go to the next chamber to kind of the mind meld it with the central computer, kind of like best way to describe it. And he starts to get flashes of all its knowledge and all that stuff, and it's just kind of like he's in a spacesuit, so you see all this, and he's kind of like doing that, and it's just really cool. I mean, it's very non-Star Trek-y, but it is a very cool sequence. I mean, I can see why they kind of changed the tone for the next film, which I'm about to get into, which is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is kind of like the pinnacle of the series, the franchise, because it's a very good film. I love when movies kind of take place, when they take kind of a plot point from the series. This obviously takes place on Space Heat with Ricardo Montalban playing as Khan. I mean, it's really cool, and I love how Chekhov just stumbles upon it by accident, and it kind of like, when he finally sees that, like, Botany Bay, and he's like, oh, we gotta get out of here, and it was just like, and the other guy's like, what, why, and it's like, oh, well, it's screwed now because Khan's there, and so it was just really cool, and just, these two films are very tonally different, and that's what really sets these two films apart, and that's why I kind of chose to do these two instead of just adding the third one, Search for Spock. So, when I will come back to the camera is when I really don't know. I'll probably come back actually in about 3 movies, because that's when I will be doing number 5, which I'll get into more of that later. So, until next time. Well, what is there to say? I didn't make it. I made it through the first 6 films, and then I fell asleep around 5 o'clock in the morning, right before I was going to start Generations, and I'm like, you know what? I'll admit defeat. I will. And it was fun. This whole experience was fun. I got to finish the original 6 films with the original Star Trek Enterprise crew, which was fun. Kind of seeing how well they kind of grew over the movies, and technology grew over the movies. And it was so much fun to watch that kind of stuff. But I am going to talk about each of the films that I did not get a chance to do on camera before I kind of fell asleep. I watched Search for Spock, which was a great film, especially in terms of Kirk's emotional beating. Because Spock died in Wrath of Khan, then his son dies in this one, and he's just getting emotionally beaten, and it was awesome. And then he finally conquers it all by throwing a Klingon off the side of the cliff into the molten lava that's kind of rising up. And it was just really cool sequence. The Klingon's played by Christopher Lloyd, so you can't get any better than that. And then the voyage home. The premise, if you read it on paper, sounds extremely ridiculous and silly. The Star Trek Enterprise crew has to travel back in time to save Earth from this unknown probe that's causing damage to the Earth. But the only way to communicate it is through an extinct species, humpback whales, which they have to travel back in time to bring them to the future. But it sounds kind of silly, but it's done extremely well. And it's kind of a fish out of a water story, literally, and it's really great, especially when the crew are actually kind of walking around modern day, for us, San Francisco, and it's really funny. So, and then you got, what's the next one? The Final Frontier, number 5, Star Trek 5, which kind of, I don't really hate this movie, I just kind of despise plot elements a lot. You got this really great opening where all, like, Spock, Bones, and Kirk are all kind of on shore leave at Yosemite Park, and they're all just kind of hanging out, talking, and trying to get Spock to embrace his human ways. I mean, it's a pretty cool sequence of them just kind of, you don't really see that all that often, and they're just kind of like, yeah, that's so cool. But when the plot kind of starts to fill in, that's where it kind of really drags on. You got this plot where this rogue Vulcan who's wanting to find the center of the universe, which is cool. I really love that aspect. Like, of going to the center of the universe, and even Kirk says like no probe has returned. I'm like, that's even cooler. Like, what really does land at the center of the universe? And then he kind of starts getting into more of the religious aspect, and like, oh dear God, come on. It's like God is at the center of the universe, and when they finally kind of make it through the barrier that's protecting the center of the universe or whatever, they get there and they meet God, and he's like, how'd you get here? And it's like, by a starship. And they're like, can I go on there? And they're like, what does God need a starship for? And they keep asking him that question, and he's refusing the answer, and it kind of reveals that he's not really, I'm really not quite sure how the movie ends because I didn't quite get it. And, but anyways, then you got Star Trek 6, the Undiscovered Country, which has to do with Klingons. It's an assassination plot, race against time kind of thing. It's okay, not the best one, but it's definitely better than 5 because of better plot elements. And back to 5. There's a bunch of scenes that does not need to be in 5. Like there's this one scene where Kirk, Spock, and Bones have been captured, and they've kind of put it in the brig of the Enterprise, and they're just kind of like, well, how did we get out here? And it's inescapable. Scotty comes to the rescue, gets him out of there, and they have this really cool sequence where the camera is kind of in front of them, and they're walking, and it's just long shot, and they're like, well, I know this shit by the back of my hands, and he turns the corner and hits his head right off. I'm like, no, that has no place to be in Star Trek to me. But I do have to admit, defeat. So that's where this is where all I'm leading up to, is I have to admit defeat once again. I have to say, I had fun. That's all that counts, and that's all that matters to me. Even though I didn't make it to the final 4, I made it to the final 4 and got knocked out. So, literally, because I fell asleep. So, anyways, my name is Max James. I do have a lot of stuff coming up in the month of not August, but April. So, stay tuned. My name is Max James, and as always, I'm going to go geek out.